With the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party leading in the polls for almost 3 straight years now, that has significantly amped up the competition for PC nominations in ridings all over Ontario. In some of those ridings, there have been numerous complaints of irregularities, shenanigans, and outright illegalities, resulting in lawsuits as well. Have some of those nomination competitions crossed any legal or ethical lines? Let's ask. John McEtitian, president of the Bradgate Research Group. Sarah McIntyre, former press secretary to Prime Minister Stephen Harper, now a communications consultant, and Christopher Reynolds, reporter with QP Briefing. It's good to see you two here again, and Chris, for the first time here on our program, good to have you along as well. Let us just start by establishing what everybody's interests are here, and John, that takes me to you off the top. You have been a participant in some of these nomination meetings we're going to be talking about here tonight?
I have been a volunteer for a couple candidates. I have been a paid consultant for a couple, and I have been a interested activist voyeur at many others.
Okay, and Sarah, no involvement in any nomination races?
None at all.
And you've just been reporting on them?
That's right.
Okay, good. So John, generally speaking, how well do you think the party has conducted itself during these nomination races?
I go to the analogy of how many drops of pee ruins the soup. So I don't think nomination meetings are something where, because they're a totality of one, right? Each riding has one nomination meeting. And frankly, to say we've only had a dozen or so major problems out of the 60 or so ridings that have been held so far, I think is false math. Especially for a party that is ready to govern and is presumed to be the next government of Ontario. I think it's distressing to have any nomination meetings with the major problems that we've had so far.
There are always shenanigans whenever any party has nomination meetings. Do we have any reason to believe these shenanigans are any worse than anybody else's or any prior years?
I think there's you need the demarcation line between shenanigans between candidates, which is probably true of every nomination meeting, and those by the process, by the party, by the neutral umpires that are supposed to be administering the game rather than fixing it.
That's a pretty strong accusation from a lifelong conservative. What are you saying?
I'm saying that those allegations have been made and that we'll never know the truth because our party has decided not to investigate anything any further, but to accept the results on the day of. So possession goes to it's like the tie goes to the runner. Possession is 9/10. That's what's happening in our process currently, is if you got nominated on a day, no allegations matter, you got the nomination.
Okay, Sarah, at both federal and provincial levels, you have looked at nomination races, numerous ones over the years. You've heard what John's had to say. How do you see it?
Well, I haven't paid as close attention or participated as John has, but you know, anytime a party gets more competitive in the sense that they have a chance of winning, then the battles at the nomination level mean all the more, because perhaps it's not just going to be an MPP, but perhaps you're going to be in cabinet. So these are types of kind of, fights that happen as the party becomes more competitive. And I think at the same time, Patrick's only been leader for a little while. The party's had some growing pains. There's been a lot more interest. There's been a lot more scrutiny on the party because there is this belief that they have a real good chance of actually winning.
Well, he's been leader for 2 years now, 2.5 years now. At what point are you no longer the new leader for whom you can excuse a bunch of stuff, and now is actually the time when you're responsible for whatever happens?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I think that, running 122 nominations with a party that maybe hasn't had the scrutiny, hasn't had the infrastructure to kind of make sure that those processes are done fairly. That being said, there's always complaints of things being rigged or unfair by the riding association against party headquarters. That happens for every single party at every single level.
And how often are those allegations actually true?
Well, that's the question. How often are they? I mean, I think that you have a leader that wants to be able to build his own team. So there's going to be candidates that he's going to want to win the nominations, and that's going to rub against what local riding associations want. So there's always that tension there, particularly as parties become more competitive.
I suspect through the course of our conversation, we're going to have specific examples from specific ridings. And Chris, that's what I want to bring you in on first. You have done a lot of reporting on the Hamilton West Ancaster Dundas PC nomination fight, which turned into quite a brouhaha, and there have been lawsuits threatened, and it's a mess. Give us the Coles Notes version, as we used to say back in my day, on what's gone on there.
That's right. Well, there was a nomination meeting held in the Hamilton West Ancaster Dundas riding back on May 7th. And allegedly, ballot boxes, or at least one ballot box in particular, was stuffed to the favor of one candidate over three others. These, of course, are just allegations at this time, but evidence that the accusers say points to potential irregularities in the ballot box are that, well, the winning candidate secured 340 ballots in the credentials box. That is one of several ballot boxes to which voters are directed when their ID or party affiliation needs to be checked. 340 ballots cast in that box within a 2.5-hour time frame suggests one ballot cast every 25 seconds, which would be an exceptionally fast rate at this particular table, especially where IDs are brought out, backgrounds, or not backgrounds, but forms are checked.
There's some checking done.
That's
so
right.
that raised a lot of suspicions.
It did.
And what about lawsuits as a result of all of that?
2 lawsuits have emerged from unsuccessful nomination candidates. Those would be from Vikram Singh and from Jeff Peller. 25-year-old Ben Levitt, who was and maybe still is a staffer at MP David Sweet's office, was the victor. 2 lawsuits have emerged, and now there's a police probe from Hamilton Police.
The Hamilton Police are investigating what has gone on, what transpired back in May.
That's right. They're looking into whether they should launch a full-on investigation of the events there. It hasn't been established that a criminal offense actually took place.
Now, I know Peller's lawyer called me the other day to say that he is considering his options in terms of legal work, but Singh's already gone ahead with his, right? Has he not?
That's right.
And where's that at right now?
That is, a judge just ruled actually this past week that his judicial review would be heard at the Superior Court level, and that potentially that the tapes that he surreptitiously recorded of a meeting between Brown's right-hand man, Waleed Soliman, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, forgive me, and himself, Vikram Singh, well, those tapes will be aired in court, and why the PC party has spent several hundred thousand...
Just hang on one second here. Vikram Singh, unsuccessful candidate for the PC nomination in this riding, secretly taped conversations he had with Patrick Brown's right-hand man from the leader's office.
That's correct, and that happened several weeks after the nomination meeting.
And what's the legal status of those tapes right now?
Sealed and off-limits to the public as a result of a request by the PC party lawyers. What those tapes contain and why the party has spent several $100,000 trying to contain that information, we don't know.
I'm going to ask the party president right after we're all done here, and we'll see if we can find out. Okay, John, you mentioned you've participated in several nomination meetings. That's one story. You want to share another?
Well, I was just going to say, that's my home riding.
You live in that riding?
I live in that riding. I was there that day, and I can tell you that 3,000 people supporting various candidates and neighbors from the community, because we visit other ridings sometimes, went through those doors of that high school, and 3,000 people supporting different candidates with different interests, different agendas, but 3,000 people walked out and said, those people don't know how to run a meeting. Everybody's unified. It was one of the worst meetings, and actually the worst meeting that anybody can remember ever having happened at any nomination in the history of our party.
Sarah, is that really the issue here, is that the party, I mean, I've heard this from lots of people, that they didn't bring the A team to run these meetings, they didn't even bring the B team, maybe the C team is running it. Have you heard this?
I haven't heard that closely, although I'm not listening. I look at the bigger picture as to how is the party actually performing, what are the positions are they putting forward, how are they responding to the fact that the 2 criminal trials are happening, that the sitting premier is actually testifying. So I kind of look at the big picture. I look at whether or not we're going to get enough votes to win the next election. Are these shenanigans, if we call them shenanigans, or otherwise allegations, investigations, are they going to cost the PC party votes in the next election?
What's your answer to that question?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think this is a lot of internal baseball and people, which is a term that we use often in politics.
Inside
which
baseball.
Is inside baseball, yeah. So these are like the geeks that like to know all the rules and know the regulations, can talk about it and they get upset about it or they're obsessed about it. But for the average person in the public, they don't even see these stories.
Well, the difference will be on election night. For that riding, for example, when Ben Levitt if he's declared the winner, everybody will go, inside baseball didn't matter. If he loses within 1,500 votes, certainly people will be saying, well, we know what it was because 1,500 Conservatives decided to sit home or vote for somebody else. So whether or not it has an impact riding by riding, and that's where the question of, is it one riding out of all of Ontario or is it more?
Well, let's can I throw another one out there?
Sure.
We happen to have some tape here. You may have heard that not too long ago in the riding of Scarborough Centre, they called in the police. Roll it.
Outside! If you don't have a badge, you're to leave the premises immediately.
John, what happened in Scarborough Centre that night?
Again, to be fair, I think incompetence at the highest levels.
That's being fair?
To being fair, because what happened there is fundamentally is they booked a small location. So the party's having challenges because it is having literally record-sized nominations. I was talking to someone on the way in, and in some of the ridings that we're going to lose, we have no hope of winning in the next election. We're going to have competitive nomination meetings with 3,000 people. So there's a challenge for infrastructure. But that being said, they booked a room that was too small, and then they let too many people in the room, and they didn't have it booked past 10 o'clock at night. Well, none of these nomination meetings, when you know it's competitive, so right from the outset, that was all poorly done. And then the reason the police were able to come in and shut it all down was because it's violating all sorts of public safety codes. They can't have too many people in a small place. Well, a smart organizer might have said, hang on, we will let 50 people in, vote, now leave, and now we'll have the next 50 people in. But they didn't do that. And that comes back to a mix of staff that is not serving the party or the leader well, and volunteers that, the same.
Why does this happen?
Why does this happen? I don't know. It's always easier to look back at things in 2020, of course. I think that, you know, there's a lot of ridings, and as John was saying, there is a lot of interest in record numbers, but there should be an adequate plan in place. We knew these nominations were going to be happening. It's not a surprise to anybody, so there should have been a clear set of rules and processes in place, adequate staff, adequate training, adequate spaces allotted, perhaps even having price right. They've got PwC in now for the rest of the nominations. Maybe they should have had that from the beginning.
Well, they were actually in Scarborough, and that's another funny story, right? Because they brought PwC in as some kind of control mechanism, and I've watched auditors at a half dozen meetings who basically are making $8,000 a day for their company, but bring no real value. The biggest value in them, the party's spending $300,000 on auditors, but hats off to the party because they're getting at least $2 million in PR, because they're making every article that's written about this stuff as if they make a difference, and PwC is making no difference to the process.
Can you tell whether PwC is making a difference?
Well, the Scarborough Centre fracas would suggest that they might not be making so much of a difference, because I guess PwC was brought in very shortly after the early May nomination meetings in Ottawa, West Nepean, where there were also allegations of ballot box stuffing, as well as Hamilton West, Ancaster, Dundas. But a month or so later in Scarborough, we had that situation. So whether they bring order, the answer seems to be right there on tape. Whether they can actually provide, whether they can actually ensure that the nomination meetings will be done without corruption, that remains to be seen as well.
Have you been able to get an answer from anybody at the party as to why they think they're having so many difficulties with nomination races?
Well, both party president Rick Dykstra and Patrick Brown have returned to this line that this is just evidence of an energized party. This is a demonstration of excitement. This shows momentum on behalf of the party.
Well, there is some truth to that, right? I mean, let's face it, the Liberals and New Democrats are not beating each other up over nominations because for whatever reason, they're not seen as prized.
The converse example in my riding would be they had 2 Liberal nominations in the same room with less than 100 people for 2 ridings. So the one had 3,000 for us. They had 100 for 2. Now, they had no problems at all.
But they held those ridings already, don't they?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have a big fight when there's already an incumbent there.
No, to be fair, the incumbent, McMeeking, is running in the one. The other riding, while competitive, you would have thought they might have a race there, but they got a star candidate, one of the local councillors. So it's being stage managed more the traditional way.
Got it. Any other race that has caught your fancy that you've looked at and said, boy, that sure seems improper?
Well, there have been more than a dozen allegations of irregularities across the province at riding nomination meetings. One in particular would have been in Newmarket, Aurora, and there were allegations there that various candidates were blocked from speaking with Tories who were bussed in to vote. Beyond that, I'm not certain what the specific accusations are. I don't think they amount to ballot box stuffing there. But there have been complaints from Milton, from Durham, from Mississauga, Arundel. So it's not confined to one riding. But again, whether Ontarians care is another issue. A late August poll suggested that less than half of Ontarians even have heard of the nomination meeting controversies. And of those 40 or so percent who had, 1/3 of them said it tainted their view of Patrick Brown.
So that speaks to Sarah's inside baseball business. If you follow politics intensely, you might be interested in this, but if you don't, you don't?
Well, but it's an inside baseball until you have a $2 million ad campaign by maybe the Ontario Liberal Party or, geez, what's the name of that group that doesn't really care about politics? Oh, yeah, Working Families. If they drop a $5 million ad campaign, we're providing them
I don't think they can't do that
stuff.
anymore. They can't do that anymore with the new,
caps. Yeah, there
with the
are caps,
fundraiser.
right.
There's ways of spending the money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to the point though, is this actually going to motivate people one way or the other to change their vote? I absolutely don't think so. Absolutely not. People are going to be coming to the polls in June, and they're going to be looking at either Kathleen Wynne or Patrick Brown. And
Or Andrea Horvath or Mike Schreiner.
I quite like
You're wearing
Andrea.
green today, so I had to get Mike Schreiner in there too.
Get Mike in there too.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's really, it's the AB option. And people, generally vote governments out, they don't vote governments in. So, as much as we can make this all about smoke and mirrors and it's actually going to have an impact, when people go into the ballot box, they're not going to be thinking about nomination irregularities.
But his view is if there are too many party loyalists who have been disrespected during the course of the nomination fights, they'll stay home.
They've been out of power, Steve, for 15 years.
14 years, yeah.
Actually, they're going to go, do I want to be sitting on the sidelines now or not?
Well, actually,
Right? That's the calculation.
I have a different perspective on voter turnout, and I would suggest that over the last 4 elections that regardless of who the leader was, our party got roughly the same number of votes. So we're down over 400,000 votes from our height of voting for Mike Harris. Having said that, during the same period of time, the Liberals have gotten roughly the same number of votes. So for us to win, we need more of our people to come back and vote for us, or Liberals to swing to us, which I suggest isn't as easy. But certainly the Liberals are giving their base reason to stay home.
Stay home,
But
exactly.
will they?
Yeah.
Christopher, let me take this up with you. There are, the Progressive Conservative Party today claims to have more than 125,000 members, which is, light years away from where they were at the end of the last election when they might have had, 12,000 or something?
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Brown, you got to hand it to him, has grown the membership of his party in an almost unprecedented fashion. Having said that, there are some social conservatives who aren't happy with him because he's kind of gone flip and flop on the sex ed issue, excuse me. He's a little too progressive on LGBTQ issues for their liking. There are others who are upset with him because he acknowledges climate change and wants to bring in a carbon tax to fulfill federal obligations that require the province to have a position on that. The question then becomes, is he not entitled to try to put his thumb on the scale for candidates that he believes are more in line with the values that he'd like to see the PC party today have?
Well, the party constitution suggests he is indeed entitled to do that. Unlike the NDP constitution, for example, the PC constitution explicitly states that the leader has veto power over all nomination candidates, and that might reduce those votes, as Rick Dykstra has said, to essentially a recommendation. So in that sense, the leader does indeed officially have power to choose who's going to be flying under the Tory banner.
Because he can refuse to sign their papers at the end of the day.
Right.
Sarah, how about that? This is there's a great debate in every party about what the leader needs and what the local constituency needs. And sometimes they're in conflict, clearly have been this time. How do you resolve all that?
Well, you don't. I mean, there's always going to be a bit of a constant tension there. I mean, at the end of the day, it was the Ontario PC membership that voted for Patrick Brown. And so Patrick Brown is the leader, and he, I think, is entitled to be, to select the team that he wants to build to lead the province into the next election. So I've always been of the mind that, not that that local riding associations and nominations don't matter, but what the leader wants is actually in the interest of all members, including those in the local riding association. They may not like it, but in the long term, it's probably going to be good for the party in terms of getting better chances at winning.
John, how heavily should the leader be able to put his thumb on that scale to favor a candidate that he wants to see win?
It depends on where you see democracy in all of this. And our system, everybody thinks it's democratic, but the reality is we basically select the king or queen of a party, and they govern. And they govern pretty well without challenge. And you go back to the responsibility. Patrick Brown wants to be the next Premier of Ontario, which requires a cabinet. And cabinet members come from successful candidates. So any party leader has the duty to field the best possible group of candidates possible. The question becomes then, with inside of a party and its constitution, what is the mechanism that you do that, and is it clear or is it not? So, for example, when Rick made the comment that nomination meetings are a suggestion to the leader, I'm going to suggest to you that as someone who had a hand in writing the Constitution back in '89, that would be a great shock to most party members.
Who think that
What
there's
a little bit
more than a suggestion.
A little bit more than a suggestion. Yeah. But that's not clear. And the reality is that there's been a lot of negotiations at the leader level in the last few years for election changes that have made wholesale changes to our democratic process, both in funding but also in structures like this that didn't used to be there. So the leaders have been pushing their agenda, serving their interest ahead of party interests.
And again, we're going to put this graphic up here, cognizant of the fact that this is a party with 125,000 members and is a large big tent party right now, but that doesn't mean there's unanimity inside the big tent. Sheldon, if you would. Stat board number one, please. These are some groups that have broken away from the former Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. This is, the Alliance Party of Ontario, the Trillium Party of Ontario. There's another group called I'm Out, another group called Ontario Blue, Stop the New Sex Ed Agenda Party, Take Back Our PC Party. There's more, but this gives you a flavor of the numbers of groups that are out there that have a problem with either the way nomination races are being run or with the leadership presented by Patrick Brown right now. My question for you, Chris, is how serious is any of this?
There aren't very many members of any of those fledgling groups right now, but one of the dangers becomes when riding members, folks who have been at associations for 10, 20 years, people who have been presidents for up to 8 years, as in the case of the Ottawa West Nepean riding president, when they jump ship for either another party or just become disgruntled. Because these are the folks who get out there and put signs on front lawns, who knock on doors. So on the one hand, you've broadly expanded your base by having a lot of nomination candidates, thus raising money and garnering interest in the party. On the other, there can be disaffection, which in turn leads to fallout. It could have ramifications down the line. So far, though, it still doesn't seem like there's enough broad, disaffection or party members jumping ship to really have a huge impact.
Does this, in your view, Sarah, represent enough of a mutiny for Patrick Brown to be worried about?
No. Not at all. I mean, it takes, 5 minutes to put up a website and call yourself a group. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have the voice of everyone. I mean, every party goes through growing pains when they change policy positions, and you're not going to be able to satisfy everyone in your party. That's the nature of political parties. They are a coalition of different interests. Sometimes some interests get more attention and get more policy favor with certain leaders. Other times they change. I mean, Patrick's come in, he's wanted to change the party. Some of those things mean growing pains, and some people are not going to be happy about it.
Would you agree that these are more websites than actual threats to the leader at the moment?
Depends on your philosophy. Do you take threats as threats and do something about it, or do you say, I'm going to win, I'm going to be Premier no matter what, so I don't care what anybody says? That's kind of a bold view. I know that during the last time we were a government in the 90s, we took great pains because that's when the federal party didn't have its act together and was divided and provided over 10 years of majority Liberal governments because that level didn't take these things seriously and the Reform Party became the dominant party. It took a lot of work to get the genie back in the bottle. Provincially, absolutely, we're nowhere near that situation yet. But again, I know in the 90s that somebody in the party made sure they registered the Reform Party name so that nobody could have any shot at any dangerous name being a label that would attract people. And I think currently it's a completely different mindset with the PC party. I think Patrick believes that, and his advisors, that they're going for the middle, the swing vote, a broader coalition, so they're not worried about people who are disgruntled or unhappy. And the reality is, no matter what the policy position is, you will never have unanimity. It's just not politics.
No, of course, not with 125,000 people. In our last few minutes, then, let's have a bit of a conversation about what can be done at this stage. The sort of verdict is out there that these nomination meetings are a bit of a dog's breakfast. Is there anything the party can do at this point to try and rein any of that in?
Well, they've already got PwC on board to cite in their quotations for media members. That is, we have
should
taken
just
steps.
establish PwC's PricewaterhouseCoopers. This is the consulting firm that has been brought in to oversee the nomination meetings.
And messed up the Academy Awards.
And messed up the Academy Awards.
Right.
That is right.
Infamy.
Will ever be known as such.
But they still have something they can cite as having taken a step toward order and independent oversight. However, I don't think the results of those reports from PricewaterhouseCoopers on any of these nominations are going to be made public. So there's not necessarily...
You think they're actually making reports?
You're not convinced?
No. But I do believe that it's a learning process, right? So let's be clear. Patrick and his team don't need to wait until 4 years from now or 2 years from now to go through the next election nomination cycle. I believe that they are learning. So if I look at the other interesting riding in my neighborhood, Flamborough-Glanbrook, I quietly passed on my 2 cents that instead of having people out there, they had a couple candidates that between them had sold thousands of memberships, and the leaders decided he has a star candidate he wants for that riding. So I said, rather than wasting these two nice guys, young guys' efforts, wasting their summer, their fall, their winter, tell them it's over. Tell them, stop. You're not going to be it. We're not going to have a meeting. We're going to have a coronation. The leader has that much confidence in that candidate. And because then you give people a chance to heal. So do you want to have a month to heal or 8 months? Well, interestingly enough, that's exactly what they did. They announced in Flamborough-Glanbrook that there won't be a nomination contest, that there will be an appointment of a candidate to be announced later. And those two guys are now hurting, but they got their summer back.
They got their summer, and they've got 8 months to get over it.
And they haven't been screwed over the way many other candidates have been, because we've had candidates who were told Thursday before the Saturday nomination, you're out. What is that?
So apparently you're still an influential person then in this party.
I suggest that I must have mirrored the opinion of many others, and we were all listened
go.
to. But that does say that the party is listening. And it also says, going back to your point, it's their first time.
Sarah,
Right.
has this all gone too far down the road to kind of bring back to some sense of normalcy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that, I'll agree with John that it's growing pains to a certain extent. And the fact that the party may not have listened or responded to every single complaint in the way that maybe they would if they had to do it again, it's important to have the lessons learned on the process. You don't want to be alienating people that want to go out and knock on doors for you. That being said, I'm 100% behind a leader being able to choose their own team that they want to bring to the election.
Well, and if I can, I saw the executive director of the party, Bob Stanley, the chief party staffer responsible for all these debacles and process. And I said to him, so are you happy that it's almost all over? And he looked at me, rolled his eyes and said, are you kidding? We've still got over 40 to go. We've got some of our biggest meetings are going to happen. So the challenge now is to go through the rest of them without any problems that they've already experienced.
Well, and I just keep going back thinking about the leadership for the Federal Conservative Party and all of the complaints about the committee that was appointed to set up the rules and the process and how many candidates were there. And there's lessons to be learned, and I hope the Federal Conservative Party took those lessons learned too. Just as I think Patrick Brown and his team are probably looking at, okay, maybe we didn't do a great job here, here, and here, and maybe we need to put in these fixes for the next time.
Well, the president of the Ontario PC Party is waiting in the wings colleagues over there, so maybe we should put some of these questions to him in our next segment. Sounds like a plan. Can I thank Christopher Reynolds for being here for the first time, a reporter from QP Briefing, Sarah McIntyre, the former Harper press secretary, now a communications consultant, John Mikitishyn from the Bradgate Research Group. Thanks, everybody, for joining us around the table here tonight at TVO.
Pleasure.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.